So I want to show you the power of cognitive services in your own programming. I'm going to start from an Azure sample, which is in the GitHub repository for Azure Samples, Cognitive Services Quick Start. This code is going to be the C#.NET code. I'm going to start with this text analytics sample, modify it a little bit, and demonstrate to you the power of being able to just call an API to do text analysis on a string of text or a phrase of text from the Microsoft Azure Cognitive Services API. So let's start by opening Visual Studio 2019 and creating a new .NET Core project console application. I'm going to call it the Text Analytics Demo. Say Next. It is on .NET Core 3.1, which is the latest version. And you can see it starts with a pretty empty demo, just says Hello World. Now I'm going to pull from this quick start the headings in terms of what you have to say using. Now you notice that it's got some red squiggly lines to tell you that there's some packages missing. So I'll go into Package Manager, and particularly I'm looking for the Text Analytics package, which is azure.ai.textanalytics. I can apply it to the project, and so I say install. Now it's smart enough to know that there are some dependencies. One of the Azure Core modules is also one of the dependencies, and so I just say install. And it installs and resolves all the dependencies, and all of the errors go away. So if I go back to the program, well, the modules aren't being used, but there's no errors. Now I do need to create a text analytics resource. Now within Azure, there are cognitive services as an umbrella resource, and there's also usually individual resources like the Face API and Custom Vision, etc. I'll put this into a new resource group called AI 102 Demo. I'm also going to call the resource itself AI 102 Demo just for convenience. I'll delete this as soon as I'm done with this demo, and there is a free tier, so you don't have to actually pay to play with cognitive services. When I click Review and Create, and then Create, it actually is pretty fast. It'll create this in only a few seconds, and so we'll let that to go and get created here. I'll click Go to Resource. And the only thing I really need from the portal at this point are the API keys and the endpoint. Before I do that, I need to go back to my code, paste in a couple of static variables that will allow me to get the endpoint and get the API key into static variables. So there, I'll just paste the endpoint here, and I'll paste one of the keys. Now we still don't have a program, right? So what we do want to do is grab the main method from the quick start. But in this case, I'm not really interested in demoing all of the language detection, entity recognition, and the personally identifiable information. So I'm going to cut out some of these demos just for the purposes of this video. Remember, later in this course, we go through each of the cognitive services APIs and give demos for each, and you'll have code to look at. So I'm just going to cut this down to sentiment analysis, which is the positive or negative traits of a phrase, and key phrase extraction. Those are the only two things I'm interested in. I'll even replace the demo phrase here to say Azure Text Analytics Services does a pretty good job recognizing how positive or negative a statement is. And as you can see, as humans, we can understand that the phrase pretty good job is genuinely positive, but it's not a glowing recommendation. So let's see how Azure handles that. The next example I want to do is what's called key phrase extraction. And so I'm going to go grab a couple of longer phrases. I'm going to go to the Azure web page for Text Analytics Services and grab the first two paragraphs to replace this phrase about the cat. So the first paragraph talks about what Text Analytics Services is, and the second paragraph talks about the types of REST APIs that are supported. And so I'll be curious to see what Azure pulls out as being key phrases from that. So here we have it. We have a pretty complete program that is calling the analyze sentiment method. That's as simple as it is. It just calls one method, passes in some text, and it's going to receive back the computer machine learning generated sentiment. The same with extract key phrases will return back an array of key phrases for whatever text you pass through. So I'm going to hit F5 and we're going to let this thing run, and let's see what Text Analytics Services has to say about those two phrases. Now the first one, as expected, it says it is a positive statement, 86% positive and 13% negative. And as you can see, 86% is fairly positive, but it's not 100% positive. And in the key phrases, well, like I said, I grabbed a couple of random paragraphs from the text analytics page, and we're seeing the phrases that you would expect. So Azure Cognitive Services, REST API, sentiment analysis, these are the key elements of that part of the phrase. So in this video, we saw how easy it is to call Cognitive Services APIs, single line of code once you have the API client set up, and it's going to return back exactly what you're looking for in terms of the output from that machine learning. So in this course, we're going to go through the requirements of the AI 102 exam. As you can see, in terms of the requirements, we start with computer vision, moving on to custom vision, language services, speech and text analytics services, and continuing on like that. So thanks a lot for being here. I hope you're excited, because I'm excited to have you here, and we'll continue on.